Good morning. Okay, so Chief Peterson. Good morning. I'm Joyce Dudley, the District Attorney of Santa Barbara County. Also with me today from Santa Barbara County is Fire Chief Eric Peterson, right there. Our state colleagues include California Attorney General Kamala Harris, and from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Chief and Deputy Director of Law Enforcement Division, David Bess. We are here to announce that in a joint prosecution with the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office and the California Attorney General's Office, Plains All-American Pipeline has been indicted by a Santa Barbara County jury of 46 criminal charges. Those charges are related to the May 2015 Refugio Oil Spill. On May 19th, 2015, as widely reported in the media, a 24-inch subterranean crude oil pipeline, commonly referred to as Line 901, ruptured. The rupture caused the release of raw crude oil from the pipeline, which then surged down a culvert under U.S. Highway 101 and into the Pacific Ocean off the Gaviota coast near Refugio State Beach. Representatives of the Santa Barbara County Fire Department were the first heroic responders. Approximately 140,000 gallons of crude petroleum were released into the environment, and the spill plume reached nearly 9 miles out into the Pacific Ocean. Petroleum related to this release has been located throughout the Santa Barbara County coastline. Investigators from the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, the California Fish and Wildlife Department, the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office, and the State Attorney General's Office conducted a criminal investigation. They did so with the assistance of additional state and local enforcement agencies, only a few of whom are here with us today. After approximately 10 months of receiving evidence and hearing dozens of witnesses, on May 16, 2016, the Santa Barbara County Grand Jury indicted corporate defendant Plains All-American Pipeline of Houston, Texas, on 46 charges, 4 felony charges, including knowingly discharging a pollutant into state waters, and 42 misdemeanor charges, including failure to notify proper authorities, as well as numerous Fish and Game Code violations. An individual employee of Plains was also indicted on some of the charges. He is James Buchanan, age 41, Environmental and Regulatory Compliance Specialist. On a personal note, I would like to commend all local agencies, especially Santa Barbara County Fire Department, for their quick and careful response, specifically Engineer Inspector Chris Olmstead. The California Fish and Wildlife Department, specifically Warden Anastasia Norris, and all associated state agencies for their very thorough investigation. Special thanks to the Attorney General's Office, specifically Brett Morris, for partnering with Santa Barbara County Deputy District Attorney Kevin Weichbrod. They were terrific with their arduous and thorough presentation to our hardworking grand jury. All defendants will be arraigned in Department 6 of the Santa Barbara Superior Court on June 6, 2016. At this point, it is indeed my great honor to introduce our State Attorney General, Kamala Harris.
Thank you, Madam District Attorney. I want to recognize first and foremost the members of my office who have been here since day one on the ground. They have been sacrificing a lot to be here, away from their families, but doing the work that needs to be done in making sure that there will be accountability and consequence and collaboration, of course, with the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office. So Brett Morris, I want to thank you, and Dennis Beck, and Olivia Carlin, David Zanona, and Doug Donahue, who of course is an agent with the California Department of Justice. And I also want to thank the Deputy District Attorney, Kevin Weichbrod, for the work that you've been doing in collaboration with my office. So this is a case that, as we know, presents important issues that must be addressed, and addressed by law enforcement. And it's when individuals have been irresponsible, frankly, in doing their work and maintaining their work in a way that mitigates and actually does not cause harm to our wildlife and to our oceans. In this case, as we know, it was just almost a year ago that Plains All-American Pipeline ruptured 25 miles from here and poured 140 gallons of heavy crude oil onto the land, cliffs, beaches, and the Pacific Ocean near Refugio State Beach. The negative impacts of this conduct were immediate and tragic. The conduct that caused the harm included harming the natural habitat, harming and endangering pelicans, sea lions, dolphins. The wildlife that was harmed included 221 birds, 142 mammals. This conduct resulted in devastation to the ecosystem, the fragile and diverse ecosystem of this area. It affected a Native American burial site and led to beach closures and affected tourism in this area. So there was wide-ranging impact as a result of this conduct. We are particularly proud, all of us here, that this is an example of federal, state, and local agencies and law enforcement coming together from day one to collaborate around what should be done, both to survey the scene, to preserve evidence, to mitigate the harm, to eliminate the damage, and work together to again ensure accountability and consequence. As prosecutors, District Attorney Dudley and I responded with our federal partners immediately after the harm occurred on May 19th by having our offices do the work that was necessary to be on the ground from day one. 72 hours after the spill was discovered, we jointly launched a criminal investigation and began the painstaking and detailed-oriented work that was necessary to arrive at this moment today. I was proud in June, at the DA's request, to come here to Santa Barbara and survey the scene myself, and to see what was going on the ground, and to figure out how we could bring resources, state resources, to the local effort to address the issue. The resources that were dedicated by our federal, state, and local agencies were pretty tremendous. There were 1,100 response personnel in the field immediately after the spill. There were 125 personnel in the Unified Command headquarters. There were 21 skimming vessels, 2 helicopters, several vacuum tank trucks, and heavy response equipment were also necessary to respond after the damage occurred on May 19th. In terms of the work of the grand jury, we were very proud to work with District Attorney Dudley in convening a grand jury, a criminal grand jury, to obtain and evaluate the evidence and to begin an investigation. We convened the grand jury 14 times. We heard from dozens of witnesses and extensive evidence and documents. And yesterday then, at our joint request, the grand jury returned a criminal indictment, and as you've heard, the district attorney explained what it involved. This is the first step in holding Plains accountable, and we are committed to putting all the resources that are necessary into seeing this case through. This case should serve as a stark reminder that any company that is operating in our state and transporting crude oil and doing it in a way that is irresponsible and in violation of the law will be held accountable. In this state, we value our environment. We value our pristine coastal communities. We value the precious wildlife and the oceans that we are proud to call a big part of California. And anyone who violates the law in endangering our wildlife and our oceans is going to be held accountable. So again, I want to thank the district attorney. She is an extraordinary leader in our state. I'm proud to work with her, and I want to thank our state and federal agencies, and in particular the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Santa Barbara Fire Department for its heroic and great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Harris. It is now my pleasure to introduce Fish and Wildlife Department Chief and Deputy Director of the Law Enforcement Division, David Bess.
Thank you. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Santa Barbara County District Attorney Joyce Dudley and Attorney General Kamala Harris for the cooperation and professionalism of their respective staffs as we work together collaboratively over the last year on this investigation. The mission of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is to manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and the habitats upon which they depend for their ecological values and for their use and enjoyment by the public. The mission of the department's law enforcement division is to protect California's natural resources and provide public safety through effective and responsive law enforcement. Today, we've accomplished that mission. Dozens of wildlife officers from our law enforcement division dedicated thousands of hours to the initial response, cleanup, and investigation of this incident. Wildlife officers assigned to the department's Office of Spill Prevention and Response are specially trained to respond to spills of this nature and to conduct and follow up on the criminal investigation. As Chief of the Law Enforcement Division, I want to thank my officers for the dedication, professionalism, and tenacity they exhibited throughout the course of this investigation. In addition, I would like to specifically thank Assistant Chief Paul Hamilton. Chief Hamilton oversees the law enforcement component of the department's Office of Spill Prevention and Response. Chief Hamilton's dedication, professionalism, and leadership were instrumental throughout the course of this investigation. It is through this dedication, professionalism, and tenacity of the department's over 400 wildlife officers that we will continue to protect, conserve, and preserve California's immense and incredibly diverse and natural resources for future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Bess. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up for questions, but wait. Please note, before your questions begin, we are very, very restricted as to what we can say. Given that the defendants have not yet been arraigned and that the grand jury transcripts will not be available for 10 days. Additionally, the court holds the indictments. Those are not yet available. The court will be releasing those when the court deems that appropriate, no later than arraignment, obviously. And the other piece is, as to the transcripts from the grand jury, the defendants or their attorneys can file a motion to seal those transcripts, so they may not be released in 10 days. So given all of that information, does anyone have a single question they can really ask?
If you can, please, Joyce, can you characterize, obviously you brought charges, the level of recklessness and disregard that you believe was involved here?
I can do that with one word: criminal.
Why?
Why the grand jury round?
There is, okay, well, the difference between criminal and civil is, in terms of negligence, is a higher form of negligence. So there's ordinary negligence and there's criminal negligence. Criminal negligence is higher than ordinary negligence.
What are the conceivable penalties that could go down against the individual that you've named?
I'm sorry, say it again?
What are the conceivable penalties that could go down against the individual you've named in the indictment, or the juries have named, and the company itself?
Okay, as to conceivable punishment, as to the individual, it could be up to, or potentially up to 3 years in county jail. Now, whether, as we all know, when we talk about maximums, those aren't necessarily what will happen, but the maximum would be 1 year per count, and it could be run consecutively, which could be 3 years in county jail. As to the corporation itself, corporations cannot be placed in jail. Therefore, it would be a matter of fines and penalties that would be divided between Santa Barbara County and the state.
Do you have a target in mind about what conceivable fines might be levied?
We certainly have numbers in mind, but at this point I could talk about the fact that they would be, I think it's safe to say, over $1 million. And in terms of whether it's much more than that, I think we'll have to wait for the evidence. Thank you.
Why the grand jury round? Why the grand jury round?
As compared to a preliminary hearing, or? One of the things that happens during a grand jury is that you hear both inculpatory and exculpatory evidence. We thought it was important for the people of Santa Barbara County to hear both, to understand what the inculpatory evidence was, to understand what the exculpatory evidence was, and to have them decide what the appropriate charges were, if in fact any charges should be brought at all. We thought it was important to hear from the people of Santa Barbara County.
Joyce, Plains has said they've been very
John?
cooperative since day one in this whole operation. Did you find the company as cooperative as they said they were from day one when this accident was revealed?
Did I find Plains?
Away at them and do other things to get what you needed?
So if I understand your question, in terms of the criminal prosecution, did I find Plains All-American to be cooperative? No.
Can you elaborate?
No. I think that what's important is, and I think you're going to be in an excellent position to make that determination once you have an opportunity to look at the transcript. But this is a long criminal investigation process, and if you're asking me how I would describe it as not cooperative.
Did you have to work with any law enforcement officials in Texas to assist you with the company's aid?
I understand your question, and at this point I can't answer it because of the evidence.
Can you tell us about the 4 felonies specifically? Is an individual named in that, and why felonies is the person that committed that?
Sure. What I can tell you is that the individual was not named in any of the felonies. Was that your question, Nick?
That's one of them.
Okay. So that was just Plains. And what's your second question?
What are the felonies in particular?
We can't discuss the individual charges at this point because the indictment has not been released.
Why are we having this then if you can't provide that information? Why not wait a couple of days when you can actually provide the information?
Because we can't necessarily provide it in a couple of days. It's going to be up to the court to determine when the indictments can be released.
How tough?
And I thought it was important to get in front of the people of Santa Barbara County as soon as possible because I understand there's been a lot of frustration in Santa Barbara County wanting to know what their district attorney's office and their state attorney general were doing in terms of this investigation.
Can we hear from the Attorney General, please, real quick?
Absolutely.
If possible, please, can you discuss what it is that led us to this many counts and why, and how serious you take these charges?
The evidence led us to this point of returning this information to you, which is these many counts, the 4 felonies, the 42 misdemeanors. The evidence led us to this place, and the evidence at some point not very far in the distant future will be shared with all of you. I think what is important about today is that this is about, frankly, transparency, about informing the public, about informing Santa Barbara and everyone in the state that these matters are taken seriously, that we do pursue them, and that justice is on its way. And this is the first step in that process of eventually, we believe, holding these defendants accountable and making sure that they receive swift and hopefully severe penalties for their bad conduct.
In terms of transparency?
What's that?
What would you say about Plains in terms of transparency?
I agree with the district attorney. They have, I think, been less than cooperative, far less than cooperative. And as we go forward, we'll see if their cooperation and their performance in this process improves. But it's been quite disappointing so far.
Attorney General, if you would, on the idea of an actual timeline for getting some justice here, civil litigation on cases like this can take years. Do you think a criminal litigation that we're talking about here, criminal filing in a criminal case, might happen on a much quicker timeline?
Well, I can tell you as a general matter that when an individual is charged with a crime in our penal code, they have a right to a speedy trial and a constitutional right, and it is their decision to determine whether they will waive that right to a speedy trial. As the district attorney has said, there's not been an arraignment yet in this case, so we don't know what position the defendant will take, but if the defendant chooses to exercise their right to a speedy trial, then it'll happen very shortly.
Could you characterize how tough it's going to be to go after a multi-million-dollar or almost billion-dollar corporation for criminal charges for an environmental crime in California?
Some would say that it is very tough to go after a private corporation when they violate our laws and harm our environment. But if you look at the firepower behind me, I think California has nothing to worry about. There will be a consequence and accountability in this case. We've got the resources, we've got the smarts, and we are committed to making sure that there's going to be accountability.
The district attorney indicated settlement of damages, something in the range of more than $1 million in penalties. Given the amount of money that was involved in the investigation, the cleanup operation and everything else, are we not talking about not a 6-figure or 7-figure, maybe a 10-figure settlement?
I think the district
100,
attorney was
200
right
million.
in her estimation. I think we are looking at somewhere between perhaps $1 million and $2.8 million, and we'll see. We'll see.
Ms. Harris, does conviction on these counts require proof of intent, or was this more a matter of negligent misconduct?
These, the level of intent that's required, the preponderance of evidence, we have to show that they knew or should have known, and so that's generally the standard.
Claims
But-
is saying that 36 of the counts deal with individual wildlife taken from the scene or as a result of that. Are they wrong in that assessment?
I'm going to defer to the district attorney's point, which is that the indictment has not, it's still under seal, but you'll have that information shortly.
Can you tell us the statutes?
And it'll be very clear when you see the indictment.
Can you tell us the statutes you're charging under?
At this point, we're going to wait until the indictment is actually released for the public, and then we can share. It's just a short matter of time.
Where does it say knew or should have known that is the basis of this?
That would be that. Those are some of the standards that are applicable to some of the charges that we believe are going to be shown in the indictment.
What should they have known? I mean, should they have known that the pipeline is corroded?
I know you want me to talk with you about the facts. I would love to do that. Can't do that right now. But you will in a short matter of time be much more familiar with the facts. But I think it is important again that you know that there has been action taken, that there has been collaboration between all of these agencies, and that there is still an ongoing process that includes cleanup, frankly, and ongoing work around determining not only the immediate harm to this area, but the long-term effect. Joyce.
Let me also respond a little further to your question. The County of Santa Barbara is represented by the Office of County Counsel, and they've received 100% of the approximately $1.9 million that was claimed so far against Plains. So there are many other civil issues that we haven't discussed. You specifically asked about fines and penalties as they relate to the criminal, and my response was upward of $1 million.
Joyce?
Yes.
Is your investigation complete, or could there be more indictments and more people?
At this point, that is all. The grand jury has been dismissed.
Do you envision
Okay, one
any
more
kind of
question.
a-
Linda, let me ask you, and Tom, followed by Tom. I can't speak to the federal process. I can tell you that we've, as Attorney General Harris said, we've been working together. Federal government, state government, everybody's been doing what they think is best to do in order to protect the state of California.
Joyce, you talked about the indictments being unsealed at some point. What's the process for that? I mean, the arraignment's not until June.
Right.
Has it been assigned to a court here?
Let me
in
be
Santa Barbara?
clear about a couple of things. The transcripts, so let's separate the transcripts from the indictments. The transcripts are transcripts of the grand jury and transcripts of any other court hearing that we've had on this matter. Those are presently sealed. They can be released in 10 days from the time that the court reporter turns it over, 10 days from that time. But the defendants and their attorneys have a right to request a sealing motion. So that's as to the transcripts. As to the indictment, that will be released when the courts deem it to be public record, and certainly no later than the arraignment, and I would expect it sooner than that. But
So
when we
has it been assigned to a court, to a judge?
it has been assigned to the arraignment court, Department 6, but as to a trial judge, not to my knowledge. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you being here. And a special thanks to the Attorney General for coming all the way down from Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, traveling around the state, taking care of all of us, and to Chief Bess. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Chief? You guys review some of the possible changes. I think your people did good at making the Vegas, by the way.
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
I was there.
And certainly no later than the arraignment, and I would expect it sooner than that. But
So
when
has
we
it been assigned to a court, to a judge?
it has been assigned to the arraignment court, Department 6, but as to a trial judge, not to my knowledge. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you being here. And a special thanks to the Attorney General for coming all the way down from Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, traveling around the state, taking care of all of us, and to Chief Bess. Have a wonderful afternoon.